Prabhupada Paramahansa Parivrajakacharya Ashtotar Sri His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prince Shakaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mathura Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Dwarka Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Savavita Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai, Nidai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembly Lokis. All glories to the assembly Lokis. All glories to the assembly Lokis. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Nice to see you all here. Nice to be here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Well, I was in two minds of what to talk about, but I think it'll come together. I want to start by talking about a verse in the second canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 4, verse number 24. What's happening here in this chapter is actually Sukadeva Goswami making his belated Mangalacharana for his recitation of Bhagavatam to Maharaj Pariksit. He was actually so. We come to the end of the first canto of the Bhagavatam where we see Pariksit Maharaj has renounced everything and is sitting now on the banks of the Jamuna. And many, many great sages have come there. And there's a little bit of a, what would you say, qualifying discussion going on about who should actually speak to Maharaj Pariksit. And then, of course, Sukadeva Goswami arrives, and everybody realizes by his bodily makeup that he's most qualified to speak to. to Parikshit Maharaj. And so Parikshit Maharaj asks him one question which precipitates everything. And he says, what should one do when he's on the threshold of death? There's one lecture where Prabhupada talks about this exchange where he begins by saying, Sukadeva Goswami is asking Maharaj Parikshit is asking Sukadeva Goswami, what should one do when he is on the threshold of death? And Prabhupada pauses for a moment and then he says very loudly, and who is not on the threshold of death? And then he goes on to explain how as we all understand, Sukadeva Goswami comes to Maharaj Parikshit at a time when we know he's got 7 days to live. And in regard to that, also, Srila Prabhupada says things like, so Parikshit Maharaj has 7 days to live. We don't even know whether we have 7 seconds to live. So anyway, that's the situation. And that question is actually very enlivening to Sukadeva Goswami. If we look at his immediate response to that, right at the beginning of the first chapter, he says, "Oh, my dear king, your question is glorious because it is very beneficial to all kinds of people." Why is it beneficial to all kinds of people? Because everyone's going to die. The answer to this question is the prime subject matter for hearing, and it is approved by all transcendentalists. The prime subject matter for hearing for everyone, because we are born in the darkest of ignorance, and we don't know what death is. Just like animals, they don't know what death is. They live with no sense that there's something after death, or what even death is in terms of their living. It's a great mystery, death. So Sukadeva Goswami is very excited about this question, and he makes it very clear that he's going to answer this question by reciting Srimad Bhagavatam. But then he gets on with it straight away. Whereas we see, generally speaking, at the beginning of a Shastra, or a commentary on a Shastra, we have what is called a Mangalacharan. Like we have the Mangalacharan Srila Prabhupada gives us at the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, beginning with Umajanati Mirandasya Devanjana Shakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jina Tasmai Shri Guruvena. This is a very common practice. Invocation for auspiciousness. So, by the time we get to the beginning of the 4th chapter, Parikshit Maharaj has been listening very intently for 3 chapters. I can't remember how many times he speaks, very little. It's mainly Sukadeva Goswami. But then at the beginning, he begins to ask a series of questions. And then we find from verse 12 to verse 24, there's only 25 verses in the chapter, but between verses 12 and 24 we have what we can understand is actually Sukadeva Goswami's Mangalacharan to the Bhagavatam, his prayers of auspiciousness and his prayers for inspiration. And he concludes these prayers with something that I wanted to talk a bit about, and then perhaps go on to a correlation to what he's talking about from something Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. And then we'll have some time for some questions or reflections from you. So verse 24 says, Namastasmai Bhagavate Vasudevaya Vedhase Papo Jnanam Ayam Somya. Thought we'd throw that in too. Somya. Yanmukam Buru Hasavam. And the translation is, it's a very clear two-part verse. The first half of the verse is, Namas Tasmai Bhagavate Vasudevaya Vedhase. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Srila Vyasadeva, the incarnation of Vasudeva, who compiled the Vedic literatures. Vedhase refers to Vyasadeva, although he's not directly mentioned. Then the second half of the verse, Papur Jnanam Ayam Somya Yanmukam Buruha Savam. The pure devotees drink up the nectarian transcendental knowledge dropping from the lotus-like mouth of the Lord. It's just a short purport, but a very telling one. Wait for the last sentence. In pursuance of the specific utterance, Vedhase, or the compiler of the system of transcendental knowledge, Srila Sridhar Swami has commented that the respectful obeisances are offered to Srila Vyasadeva, who is the incarnation of Vasudeva. Srila Jiva Goswami has agreed to this, but Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur has made a further advance, namely that the nectar from the mouth of Lord Krishna is transferred to his different consorts, and thus they learn the finer arts of music, dance, dressing, decorations, and all such things which are relished by the Lord. Such music, dance, and decorations enjoyed by the Lord are certainly not anything mundane, because the Lord is addressed in the very beginning as para, or transcendental. This transcendental knowledge is unknown to the forgotten conditioned souls. So the rest of this now is, as Srila Prabhupada used to say, one of his transcendental ecstasies. Listen very carefully. Are you okay? Srila Vyasadeva, who is the incarnation of the Lord, thus compiled the Vedic literatures to revive the lost memory of the conditioned souls about their eternal relation with the Lord. One should therefore try to understand the Vedic scriptures, or the nectar transferred by the Lord to his consorts in the conjugal humor, from the lotus-like mouth of Vyasadeva or Sukadeva. By gradual development of transcendental knowledge, one can rise to the stage of the transcendental arts of music and dance displayed by the Lord in his rasa dance. Confirmed. I'll read that again. By gradual development of transcendental knowledge, one can rise to the stage of the transcendental arts of music and dance displayed by the Lord in his rasa dance. But without having the Vedic knowledge, one can hardly understand the transcendental nature of the Lord's rasa dance and music. The pure devotees of the Lord, however, can equally relish the nectar in the form of the profound philosophical discourses and in the form of kissing by the Lord in the rasa dance, as there is no mundane distinction between the two. Does everybody get that? The point Prabhupada's making here? We have our prayer for the Guru Puja, Sri Guru Charana Padma. And there's a line in the third verse which says, Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Advidya Vinasa Jate. Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite. From him, ecstatic prema emanates. By him, ignorance is destroyed. Now here we have one can equally relish the nectar in the form of the profound philosophical discourses. These books of Srila Prabhupada's are the most profound philosophical discourses you will ever be able to comprehend or attempt to comprehend. And these books have emanated from Srila Prabhupada. So, Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite. From him, ecstatic prema emanates. So everything Srila Prabhupada is writing here in these books, you can take every word, every sentence as being like a little time-release capsule of prema into your consciousness. Just like this purport and this last statement of this purport, that there is no mundane distinction between hearing of Krishna kissing the gopis in the rasa dance and reading Bhagavad Gita. No difference. All qualitatively the same. And this is one of the statements in my own experience of reading Srila Prabhupada's books, where I've come to understand the reality of what I just said about how every sentence and every word in these books is like a time-release capsule into your consciousness. And as you become more serious, more deeply serious and sincere about becoming fully Krishna conscious, then even though you may read this and miss it, then you read it one day and it will enter your consciousness in such a way that I came across this purport again 2 years ago. And I was sitting for just minutes after I read it, just in a kind of stunned state, just saying, how did I miss this? How did I miss this? Well, I missed it because I wasn't ready for it before. But after many long years of struggling, there are rewards. There are rewards. Sometimes we chant and chant and chant and try to read and fall asleep and become overburdened with so many daily challenges that we have to deal with. But one should never give up. That's also there in the Harinam, 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 Eva Kevalam, Kalo, Nasteva, 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 Gati, Gati. Ga means to go. Gatiya means, and then Gati means keep going. Don't stop. Don't ever stop. Just no matter what, you keep going. There's a famous statement by Winston Churchill where he said, "Now, if you're going through hell, keep going. Keep going. Don't stop. Keep going. No matter how you might think, oh, my sadhana is atrocious, I don't hear my rounds properly, I can't concentrate on reading, and so on and so forth. Don't stop. Don't stop. Actually, it's good to read out loud. We were just talking about that on the way over. There's a very nice little purport in this regard about hearing and chanting. In the first canto, right at the beginning of the Bhagavatam, in the first canto, in the first chapter of the first canto, 6th verse. What was that?
I don't know, just automatically picked up your voice. Siri picked up your voice.
Oh.
Looked for it on the web.
The phone did. That's pretty scary now, isn't it? Anyway, the first chapter of the Bhagavatam begins with the sages at Naimisharanya, which is a very major gathering for the repetition of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We won't go into all the details of why. But then in the verse 5, it says, one day, after finishing their morning duties by burning a sacrificial fire and offering a seat of esteem to Srila Sukha Goswami, the great sages made inquiries with great respect about the following matters. And they begin by saying to him, respected Sutta Goswami, you are completely free from all vice. You are well versed in all the scriptures famous for religious life, and in the Puranas and the histories as well. For you have gone through them under proper guidance and have explained them also. And I just wanted to read this, again, short purport, to come to the point that I'm making about reading out loud and reading in groups, reading together in groups. Because we're not in a competition here. Krishna consciousness is a team sport. You're not in competition against everyone else to know more than everybody else and to be the first one back home, back to Godhead. or to be the one who makes the cut of the group who will be in the final stages of the tournament to see who goes back to Godhead. It's got nothing to do with anything mundane. We all get the same prize. We all go back to Godhead. So, Srila Prabhupada used to say, your love for me will be demonstrated by how you cooperate together. So, in that regard, the reading of Srila Prabhupada's books is a point made about that in this purport. Right at the end. Just bear with me, it all leads up to it. A Goswami, or a bona fide representative of Srila Vyasadeva, must be freed from all kinds of vices. The four major vices of Kali Yuga are illicit connection with women, animal slaughter, intoxication, speculative of all sorts. A Goswami must be free from all these vices before he can dare to sit on the Vyasa. No one should be allowed to sit on the Vyasa who is not spotless in character and who is not freed from the above-mentioned vices. He not only should be free from all such vices, but must also be well-versed in all revealed scriptures, or in the Vedas. The Puranas are also parts of the Vedas. The histories, like the Mahabharata and Ramayana, are also parts of the Vedas. The Acharya, or the Goswami, must be well acquainted with all these literatures. To hear and explain them is more important than reading them. Sorry? I wonder if he's getting the same message. You know, a lot of anyone familiar, this is aging me, but is anyone familiar with Bob Dylan? Yes? I read an article recently where if you want to go to a Bob Dylan concert, you have to hand your phone in at the reception. They put it in a numbered bag and keep it like on a shelf. And when you come out, you got your tag and you get your phone back. That's at a Bob Dylan concert. There's a meme going around. It's in there of Sukadeva Goswami sitting and saying, "Somebody, could you just block your incoming calls for a while?" I used to get really upset about it, but it's laughable actually. Oh my God, the exchange rate just went down. To hear and explain them is more important than reading them. One can assimilate the knowledge of the revealed scriptures only by hearing and explaining. Hearing is called Shravanam and explaining is called Kirtanam. The two processes of Shravanam and Kirtanam are of primary importance to progressive spiritual life. Only one who has properly grasped the transcendental knowledge from the right source by submissive hearing can properly explain the subject. So many references we could go off into about this. But the point is that we have to develop, all of us, we all have to develop a strong program of hearing. Hearing the scripture on a regular basis. Hearing it and then explaining it. Yes? Explaining it to, well, and that's another, that I think we can segue at this point into the interesting little point I wanted to make about Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita. Who knows how many verses there are in the Bhagavad Gita? Sorry? 700. So that makes the 350th and 351st verses the absolute center of the Bhagavad Gita. Yes? Does anybody have any idea what those verses are?
9.2.
Huh?
934.
9, 13,
And?
14.
9, 13, and 14. We have a pundit. Why should I ask you? You know everything. But these verses are very important in terms of what we're talking about here. Mahatmanas tumam pata, daivim prakritim ashrita, Pajampyananya manaso gyatva bhutadim avyayam. Satatam kirtayantoma yatantascha tridavataha. Namasyam tas jamam makya nitya yukta upasate. O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of the divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible, always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me. These great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. And that point is rephrased with a nuance in the Chatusloki verses of the 10th chapter. Yes? What are the Chatu verses? Chatu, I need to drink. Can I get some more water, please? What are the Chatusloki verses of Bhagavad Gita? No pundits. Does anyone know what those verses are?
10.8 to 10.12.
11.
11, sorry.
8, 9, 10, and 11. And 9 is more or less a restatement of this verse, but with a nuance, which is very important. And that is, Mach Chitta, Mach Kata Prana, Bodha Yanta, Parasparam, Kata Yantas, Jamam Nityam, the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. And in this regard, we'll go back to the final part of the purport from the verse from the 4th chapter of the 2nd canto. By gradual development of transcendental knowledge, one can rise to the stage of the transcendental arts of music and dance displayed by the Lord in his rasa dance, in his rasa lila. But without having the Vedic knowledge, one can hardly understand the transcendental nature of the Lord's rasa dance and music. The pure devotees, however, can equally relish the nectar in the form of the profound philosophical discourses and in the form of kissing by the Lord in the rasa dance, as there is no mundane distinction between the two. Om Tat Sat. Wow, we're filling up. We're getting near the feast time, isn't it? I don't mean that. I remember once in Melbourne, we used to have the Sunday feast in a downtown preaching centre, which was a big cellar underneath the Central Railway Station. Big, long, probably almost twice as long as this room. Not as wide, but probably almost twice as long. And we used to have the Sunday feast down there, and you'd be like this, you're giving the class, and there'd be like, start off with maybe 10 people, and then there'd be gradually filling up. And then we'd have the arti, and then we'd have the feast. And by the time we'd finished the arti, the place was full of people. So one Sunday, just as a joke, we served the feast first.
That's what we do here.
Oh, you had the feast already.
Always. This is the.
No, this is the.
Am I wasting my time?
We have the feast first. So yeah.
You have the first feast. The feast first. You've had the feast.
Today's an exception.
Huh?
Today's an exception.
This is like Tracy Yugoslavia. Things have changed. Okay, so I'll stop there and see, does anyone have any questions or reflections on any of this? Who has a regular program of reading? Don't be ashamed if you don't. It's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do. But my point is, it's easier to do it in company. In company. Now, I was just recently in England, and I have a friend, or friends, a married couple, who started a little centre in a coastal town, south coast, called Folkestone. Not a very big town. I think it's 200,000-300,000 people. And they have a little temple, a little shop. They have a lovely program. But one thing they do every Saturday morning, between the temple and on Zoom, they, from people at home who can't come into the temple, they have sometimes 30, 40 people get together and read Srila Prabhupada's books. And they are progressively going through the Bhagavatam. And everybody reads, even the little children, they read. And it was an interesting thing for me that I was talking with Kripa Moya Prabhu. Everybody, I think, knows of Kripa Moya, pretty much world-famous preacher and Kirtani. And he was telling me, because he's always interested in like the sociological issues of what's going on in little communities and things. So he asked one young Grihastha man there, how do you deal with your controversies and conflicts that arise in your community? And he told me, the boy turned around to him and said, oh, we don't have any of those here because we all read Prabhupada's books together. And we're conditioned souls. We're conditioned souls. And we're very heavily conditioned by the culture that we have to struggle to survive in. Getting quite a few nods here. Yes? And that culture is all based upon what I was joking about before, that you're on your own, Jack. You gotta make it or break it yourself. And right from the moment you go to school, you're put into competition against people you never met before. You don't know them. You don't even get a chance to know who you're in class with before you're competing against them. And this goes on progressively through your education. So we have to get over this. We have to get beyond this. This is a disease. This is a disease. This is what creates more and more material conditioning for us. Because first off, we're not educated. We're schooled, but we're not educated. The word education comes from Latin, eduque. Duque means to lead, a means out. It's actually commensurate with the basic aphorism of the Vedic literature. Tamasi ma jyotirgama. This is education, to lead us out of darkness into knowledge. But the schooling that we go through does not lead us out of darkness. it leads us further into darkness. Because the first principle we see Krishna elucidate to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita is never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. When Prabhupada was invited to speak at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, he began by saying, where in this great institution of education, or so-called education, is that department which helps you understand what is the nature of the self? What are you? And the first thing Krishna says, you're an eternal living being and you're an eternal individual. And then it goes on to explain that. What's the next verse? Who knows? Famous verse everybody learns. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Next. Loud. I'm deaf. I'm deaf. The ending of that verse is very important. Dhirastatra manuyati. One who has become dhira through proper education is not bewildered. We're struggling for existence within a society of bewildered people. And you will find as your life goes on, something probably talked about also on the way up here today. You can read this in the purport to the 2nd chapter, 17th verse of the Bhagavatam. Very important chapter. Chapter 2 and chapter 3 are the equivalent of chapter 2, are equivalent to the Bhagavatam of what chapter 2 of the Gita is to the Gita. And the 2nd chapter of the Gita is called what? Who knows the title of the 2nd chapter of Gita?
Content of the Gita summarized.
Contents of the Gita summarized. So chapter 2 and chapter 3 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, you could more or less say contents of the Bhagavatam summarized. Very succinct statements. And you can read in 2:17, 1:2:17. Does anyone know that verse? Hand up if you do, please. Don't be ashamed if you don't. This is not an elimination quiz. You still get to take the fix. Anyone know it? It's a very, very powerful verse. Srinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. I have someone else? Somebody else was chanting? Who?
Yeah.
You were chanting? No? Okay. Srinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana. This explains how Krishna helps us. You can read it. But in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, this is the point I'm making. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes it very clear that there are very few people, very few jivas who actually want to go back to Godhead. Actually want to go back to Godhead. But that's what this movement is about. That's what we are about. That's what the International Society for Krishna Consciousness is about. That is what Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement is about. To open the door. To open the door to Goloka Vrindavan. For anyone who is interested to go there. Go back there. And it's done by this process of hearing and chanting together as much as possible to develop that. How long have I got? Have I gone too long? It's nearly 6:30. That's it? We're finished now?
Yeah, a few minutes for questions, if anyone.
Any questions?
It's interesting how in the second canto itself,
I beg your pardon? Sir?
in the second canto itself, in the first 3 chapters, Bhagavatam finishes because
Bhagavatam?
it's over. Because second canto chapter 1 is the first step in God realization, that's the Brahma stage.
Yeah.
Then it says Lord in the heart is the second chapter, that's
Yeah.
the Paramatma stage. And third is pure devotional service, the change in heart, that's the
Yeah.
Paramatma stage.
Yes.
So technically, in the second canto, third chapter, Bhagavatam finishes. Then Sukadeva Goswami offers his.
Well, then Parikit starts asking questions.
Yes.
So, any questions? There's a very nice book out now. I don't know if you've got it here by Sheshika Prabhu called The 4 Questions. Yes? And he's like me. He likes to look into the etymology of words. And he makes the point about the word question comes from the word quest. Quest means you're looking for something. You're trying to find something. You're trying to understand something. So questions are very important. And Prabhupada makes that point also in the second chapter of the Bhagavatam, in the 5th verse, where Sutta Goswami, who was present when Sukadeva Goswami recited the Bhagavatam to Maharaj Pariksit, we get that before what we hear from Sukadeva in second canto, chapters 1, 2, and 3. We get it from Sutta Goswami in the second chapter of the first canto, where he says, your question is what your questions, the initial 6 questions that the sages at Naimisharanya asked. Sutta Goswami responds by saying these questions are glorious. And then Prabhupada in the purport makes the very conclusive case that everything happens on the basis of questions. And he goes through how the birds are getting up in the morning and asking questions, and then the businessmen in the market are asking questions and getting answers. Everybody's asking questions and getting answers. But we don't find questions like we have from Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita and from the sages at Naimisharanya, headed by Shonaka Rishi, or questions that Pariksit Maharaj is asking of Sukadeva Goswami. And as we go through the Bhagavatam and we go into the different layers of how one question after another leads us to other situations where those questions were answered at different places at different times. It's all based upon the progression of questions. Yes? So does anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
Isn't competition inherent nature or is inherent part of the human nature? Like I'm talking about non-enlightened people, because that's where they find motivation to do something.
It's a part of living within the 3 modes of material nature. But while we live within the 3 modes of material nature, we are more animal than human. But even in high places of different sadhus and so on, we see that competitiveness coming out. But it's not pure. It's not it's not a pure competitiveness, because in the material world, competition means I win, you lose. In the spiritual world, competition means we all win. It's a different consciousness. And it's devoid of any sense of false ego. Yes? We are primarily trying to transcend the influence of the three modes of material nature. And the three modes of material nature and all the first generation of subtle energy that covers us comes from a mode of ignorance in the form of the false ego. So therefore, we're all actually bewildered, because we think we're doing. There's a beautiful verse in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verse number 27. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai kamani savasvaha ahankara vimudatma kataham iti manyate. Ahankara vimudatma is one word. It's a hyphenated word. You know, Sanskrit is built by. So ahankara vimudatma. And it's translated by saying the bewildered living entity. First, bewildered by false ego. Under the influence of the three modes of material nature, it becomes very foolish. Vimuda becomes a very foolish entity, because he thinks that he is the doer of activities which are actually carried out by nature. And whose nature is that? That's Krishna's material nature. So long as we are acting under the modes of material nature, then the forms of competition that we may enter into are based upon defeating somebody. Yes? But in the end, everyone's a loser in the material world. Good question. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Sorry?
My question is,
Yes.
we hear that it is better to hear and explain than read. So what is the difference? Hearing and reading.
Oh, this is a very good point as well. So, if you can't hear, you can't read. I was giving a talk to a deaf sangha in London. And when you give a talk to a deaf sangha, you have a person sitting here or standing here who all of the people in the audience are looking at, because he's signing everything. Just like, let's do a bit of sign. Hare, Hare. Krishna. Krishna. Hare, Hare. Krishna. 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 Hare, Hare. Hare Rama. Hare Rama. Rama Rama. Hare Hare. So anyway, at the end of the talk, I asked for any questions, and so one person signed their question here, and then the person said to me what the question was, and I said, "Oh, you can find the answer to that if you read." And as I said, read. The man who was hosting the program, he was standing next to me here, and he leaned in and he said, "They can't read." And I was shocked. I said, "What are you talking about? Everyone can read." He said, No. They can't read because they can't hear." How do you think of it? Why do you speak the languages that you speak? How many? I mean, you people, most of you can speak at least two. maybe 3, sometimes 4 languages, yes? How did you learn those languages? Huh? Hearing. Simple. And how did you learn to read? Somebody sat you down and showed you a symbol and said, this is T. And then another symbol, this is H. And then another, this is The. The cat sat on the mat. Yes? Say it. The cat sat on the mat. So now, don't make the sound. Now don't even move your lips. Just read it. That's what reading is. But if you can't hear, you can't read. So reading is hearing is fundamental. And just like with japa, Srila Prabhupada explained and encouraged us, you chant your japa as if you're talking to somebody in the room. You chant your japa as if you're having a conversation with someone. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. One time on a morning walk, one very earnest American devotee asked Srila Prabhupada, what should you think of when you chant your japa? I'm not very good at American accent. And Prabhupada said, where is the question of thinking? You simply chant and hear. Just hear this sound vibration. Hear it. But unfortunately, if you're deaf, you can't hear it. So hearing is fundamental. And above that, there's a devotee, I can't remember his name now, in New Zealand, quite a pundit. Do you know him? Panditji? No? He did some research about this, and he sent something around. This was years ago on the internet.
No,
Jaitirtha
Jaitirtha.
Charan. Jaitirtha Charan. And he came up with evidence from some Vedic scripture that the last sense to die is the ear. So even though everything else shuts down at the moment that the heart stops, you can't see anything, you can't taste anything, you can't smell anything, you can't feel anything, but you can hear something. That's why it's always recommended that when a devotee is leaving their body, that you chant them out. You chant the kirtan while they leave their body. Does that answer your question, Prabhu? Are you satisfied?
No.
You're not satisfied. But that's your nature.
Just addition to that.
Huh?
Just,
Sorry?
I should have told you privately, but it is absolutely right, because I had out-of-body experience, and I could not feel anything, see anything, but I could hear.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
And it's even better when you hear together with other people. Sankirtan. This is Sankirtan Yagya. Sankirtan Yagya. Getting together and hearing together. Hearing and chanting together. I remember when I was a kid, there was a what are they called? Evangelical Christian preacher called Billy Graham. And his motto was, the family that prays together stays together. Yeah? So we can do that. This reading is a form of prayer. Reading is a form of prayer. And then, the family that preaches together, reaches together.
The family which dances together advances together.
Sorry?
The family which dances together advances together.
There we go. It's a good motto.
The family which loves together serves together.
The family that
serves together, loves together.
I didn't catch the second one.
Serves together.
The family that serves together,
Loves together.
Loves together.
loves together. There you go. These are good. This is good. Hare Krishna. Oh, glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Bhagavad Prabhu ki
Jai.